For the access, we thank Omaha Productions for their help in putting that together. We thank the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, for joining us here in San Francisco. Good to see you again.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Got a couple of things about Draymond Green, and then I'll open the floor to my compadres here. Players will say stuff happens all the time. You know, players getting punched by other players, by teammates. How concerning was that episode to you as the commissioner?
Well, I'll let these players talk to what happens, you know, behind closed doors at practice. Of course, it's concerning any workplace to see, you know, an assault of that kind. But on the other hand, I recognize I've been involved with the league for a long time. You know, usually there's no video, but even Steve Kerr's acknowledged he was on the receiving end of a punch like that many years ago from a teammate. And I think particularly when you have an organization that you know is well run, it should be left to them to handle something that happens within their organization. I think when the role for the league is either when there's some reason to believe it's not being handled appropriately, or in essence a referee is needed because it's between two organizations. But I have enormous confidence in this organization. I mean, you know, Steve, of course, Bob Myers, and they've demonstrated that there should be deference to them to deal with an issue like this.
The other one about Draymond is something that I was listening to his podcast or watching a clip of his podcast, and this came shortly after he had used an unfortunate word to describe Kendrick Perkins. It was a racial term to describe Kendrick Perkins, and he tried to walk it back a little bit, but at that same time said he had spent 45 minutes with you, meeting with you. He had been there to see Joe Dumars, but spent 45 minutes with you. What's your message to Draymond Green? And, well, that's it. What is your message to him?
Well, I mean, part of the conversation should remain private, but essentially that the eyes of the world are on you, and that you have a responsibility as part of this league to comport yourself in a certain way. And I think in that case, it was, to me, the fact that he went out, he apologized, he acknowledged that it was an offensive word. It's one that he regretted having used. I mean, it's you know, what happens in this league, these are real people who have, you know, as Draymond said at the end of that past video, they're low moments, bad moments. I think everyone here has had them. They don't play out publicly for most people, but to the extent they do in the league, I don't excuse it because other people have those moments. I think we all recognize, and you guys well know as being part of this league, even post-playing career, that what you do continues to, you know, you continue to be representatives of the league, and people pay a lot of attention to what you do, to what people in the league office do, and that's part of who we are. And so we take on that responsibility. I think it's the in essence the implicit contract we have with our fans, with people who care about this league, and that when we do make mistakes, and I credit Draymond for that. Same thing with the most recent incident, that he's willing to speak about them, to acknowledge when he's wrong. That's an important part of it as well.
Chuck, go ahead.
As a resident idiot up here, I will tell Draymond this. Number one, he was 100% wrong. But if you, now see, this is an idiot back here. You can't go around punching coworkers. I will tell him this as a guy who crossed the line many times. If you play with an edge, you're going to go over the edge. I went over the edge many times. I was mad at Miss Gomez from high school. I was mad at my dad. I didn't enjoy basketball the first few years of my career because I was mad at all the stuff that happened to me when I was a little kid. And I played like that. And I kept going over the line, which he has. You have to take a step back and grow up and say, you know what? I'm not mad. They didn't draft me higher. I'm sticking it to all these people because I'm a much better player than they drafted me as. I'm just going to appreciate being a heck of a player. It took me about 4 years to learn that message because I was mad at everybody early in my career. Because like I say, it doesn't matter if, it's just a matter of when you cross that line, and you keep crossing that line. He's got to take a step back and say, hey, man, I got it great. I've had a hell of a career. I got to calm down. You don't have to, because you're going to keep going. Listen, if you play with an edge, you're going to keep going over the edge. And he's a heck of a player, but he's got to take a step back, because it's something that disturbed me about that bit. He acted like it was all right that he punched a teammate, because he said, I didn't even think about it again until the video came out. Punching your coworkers ain't good if they never see the video.
Yeah, I think if you see, it's interesting you said that, Charles. I wrote down the word counseling, and I was thinking about the league, because I think, what Charles just alluded to, there are some inner demons that a lot of the inner city players that come from all of a sudden is thrust into a financial wealthy situation, but also we've also at 19, 20-year-old, you're making $1,000 decisions on $1 billion franchise. So your decisions affect billions of dollars in what you do and what you say, like the Michael Jordan effect, how much money he made just by being in Chicago, for the city of Chicago. So what's happening in the city right now, we have all of this stuff that's brought up just because it's a ring night, and he is a big effector of that. But the general public only can see it from a normality standpoint. Oh, this is right, this is wrong, he should do this, or maybe he shouldn't. I think right now what's needed in the NBA, and if you look at what's happening in the coaching world, and you look at what's happening now with Draymond, is another force of counseling that you've provided before in other areas now about how to make billion-dollar decisions on what your behavior is, and not $1,000 decisions when you're in your neighborhood and what happens to your family.
I think people need to understand and realize that, for example, in an hour, 2 hours, you're going to go through the ring ceremony and everybody's going to be laughing and have a good time. That's not what it's like to win a championship. You may think it is, but you're going to have arguments. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to have fights. You're going to have secret meetings. You're going to call people out. These things happen. Tussles happen. Fights happen. I'm not going to sit up here and act like I didn't touch a lot. I touched a lot of people up in my years. Hopefully, the statute of limitations is up. Sometimes, as a leader, you got to, put people in their place. You may agree, you may disagree, but I did what I did as a leader. I thought it was the right thing to do, and for me, it worked like that. Draymond is a player that plays on the edge, so I'm not going to critique what he did, but I know for a fact it happens. And I also know for a fact winning the championship is not la, 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 la. You're going to have fights, you're going to have arguments, you're going to call people out, you're going to have disagreement. Now, if the respect factor is lost, they'll never win again. Now, I've had, fights with teammates, and I'm sorry, my bad, apologize, everything was forgotten, and the respect factor was still there, and we were able to get back on track. I think they will definitely get back on track. They have a great tradition here. Draymond is the guy that, plays a certain way, talks a certain way, walks a certain way. So, obviously, from now they look good, but, only time will tell.
Adam, you've had a situation with Robert Sarver in Phoenix. You caught some heat for not coming down hard enough there. You've had the situation with Ime Udoka in Boston. How confident are you that the 30 teams in the NBA are being run responsibly?
It's a great question. I mean, again, I think just like you see instances with players that they're with 30 teams, lots of different situations, there are going to be incidents. I think it's fair for people to judge us based on how we handle them. We were very transparent. In the case of Robert Sarver, we had an outside law firm. They interviewed 320 people. They took 9 months. And with that transparency, I understand that it gives people the ability to look at the facts for themselves, as long as they stick to the facts that were found and say, I would have reached a different judgment than you did. And it'd be crazy for me to say, when we're encouraging people to speak out, whether it be players or anyone else, that people in an instance like that shouldn't be entitled, whether players or anybody else, to their own opinions. But I'm confident we have procedures in place that the investigation of the Phoenix franchise and Robert Sarver went back 18 years. There's a lot of things we've done in the last few years, really came in place just a year or two before COVID. League-wide hotlines, for example, all kinds of modern things. And it's not just unique to sports or the NBA that a lot of workplaces have put in place, because there are things that used to go on, earlier on in my career in workplaces, language that was used, attitudes people have had that are no longer acceptable. I mean, they weren't acceptable back then, believe me, but it went on in ways that are completely unacceptable today.
When you hear someone suspended for a year and the gratuitous of how what had happened in Phoenix, and in a year, how do you change someone's thought process? Or are there barriers that he has to leap over to come back? Because, I could just sit back and wait for collect my check and come back and be owner of a team again. So what does he have to do with inside of that year? I think that's what the public also, and even us, would like to know.
Right. Well, first of all, some of it's a moot point because he's announced he's selling the franchise. But had he not made that decision, part of ultimately the finding of the league was that in addition to putting in place monitoring of the franchise and training for their senior executives, also Mr. Sarver was going to go through training of his own. But I'd say with any set of discipline, I mean, again, whether in the league or in society at large, you can never really know if you've changed what in somebody's heart or mind. I mean, presumably part of the reason you put in these guardrails are to create incentives for people, frankly, not to do things because there are going to be consequences. I recognize that in a lot of cases, people are who they are. I don't think, even going back to what we're talking about, what we're all old enough to have been in workplaces many decades ago, I don't want to pretend that we're now dealing with different DNA, that people are different, but people now know that if I were to do or say something that might have been said many decades ago, I'm going to be terminated or disciplined in some way. So life is...
They want to go to commercial, but I need y'all to hold on a second. I got a serious question. Because I actually thought some of the criticism of you were unfair. What are you able to do as commissioner? Because you're like, I just can't take anybody's team. So I want to give you a chance, because I'm like, y'all act like this guy can just say, hey, Robert, we got you. You have to sell your team. So what are your limitations is my question.
My limitations, the maximum fining power I have at the league is $10 million, and he was fined $10 million. And then I have the power to suspend, but I don't have the power to require him to sell the team. That can only come about through a league-wide process where ultimately there's in essence a hearing before all of the other team governors, and then 3/4 of the team governors would need to vote to remove someone from team ownership. But again, in fairness to those who are criticizing me, I did not come out based on the findings in the report and say we should begin that process. And I think, again, knowing that with a transparent report like that, there's going to be a response from the community, and whether it's players, it's team sponsors, it's the community at large, I think based on that response, Mr. Sarver made a decision to sell his franchise, and I said at the time I thought that was the logical next step to the process.
Adam, thank you for the time. We appreciate you stopping by. We could go on for quite some time here, but we'll do that another time. Thank you
guys
for stopping by. We appreciate you. We'll take a break.